Hey everybody, David here, and welcome to the ASOG podcast. I remember looking forward to the various weekend shows on television featuring muscle cars, awesome new technology, and lots of horsepower. In fact, aside from pure necessity, one of the reasons I started working on cars is to learn how to modify them for more performance. But what does owning a performance shop actually look like? Is it what's being portrayed on television in years past or on YouTube today? To answer that question, we're joined by Mike Maleski, the owner of PSK Auto Repair in White Oak, Pennsylvania. Mike reveals the true nature of the automotive performance scene. But before we begin, if you're an automotive industry professional or a shop owner yourself, then you are in the right place. This is a podcast created by shop owners, for shop owners, and those seeking out their perspective. We have frank and open conversations like the very one you're about to listen to, where we discuss the struggles and challenges we have every single day and what we're trying to do about it. So, if you like this content, we'd greatly appreciate a subscription on your favorite podcast listening app. If you're catching us on YouTube, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. Now, with all that out of the way, here we go.
Mike, it is really good to talk to you. I'm really happy this time you're not like on the edge of death. I think that's pretty awesome. For those who don't know, Mike was sitting in front of me in a vision class, and I thought the dude was going to die from the flu right there while I watched. So definitely glad you feel better. That's pretty awesome. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, sir. I feel much better. I'm pretty sure that I had COVID before COVID existed.
Dude, I'm telling you, I have never seen somebody look as rough as you looked that day. No offense.
Did you ever get tested for antibodies?
No, I haven't.
This was year before last, so.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
19? Oh. So we have a friend, a mutual friend, who he got sicker than a dog in, I think it was January. And maybe it may have been December. I don't remember. But I mean, he was like out for a week and a half. And so this was in March, because we had just gotten back from Vision, and he's crazy sick, and they had just rolled out COVID testing, and he goes and gets tested, or he kept showing up, and they're like, no, we don't have any tests, so you can't get tested. So he goes in, and he keeps going back and checking. He's like, man, I am really, really sick. I think I have this. Can you guys check me? And he ended up infecting his entire family. And
oh, man.
They kept telling him, we don't have any tests. Well, they finally test him, and he tests negative. And he's like, man, I know I had this. So they roll out antibody testing, and he goes and gets that. And he was through the roof. He had it at some point. And so he's hella immune now. But he couldn't say anything, or he couldn't prove that he was sick, but he was down and out for a week and a half or 2 weeks or something like that. So, man,
knock on wood.
Yep.
And he had it. I'm feeling pretty good about things right now. Let's just keep it that way. David,
it can go either way. My brother-in-law had no idea. He got tested twice. Because the first time he's like, you guys are nuts. I don't have it. So he goes to a completely different area, completely different state, and gets tested again. And they're like, yeah, you have it. And he's like, okay, well, I guess I have it. I guess I have to quarantine for 2 weeks. But he had no symptoms, nothing.
Man, that's crazy. Our accountant went through a very similar thing. He tested positive and didn't have any symptoms whatsoever. So, who knows? Who knows how the cookies crumble? So, Mike, you'll find that we're not very formal, ever, and like you didn't already know that. But in all seriousness, David has brought you here tonight to talk about the evil shop of auto repair shops, the performance shop.
It's the petulant teenager of auto repair, the performance shop.
Well, and look, so I've got a little bit of background in performance as well. I started in performance. We were working on diesel trucks, And that was kind of where we got our start. And, we saw some things happen in the market that really kind of tanked that market in a lot of ways. And I said, you know what? Let's work on cars. And I personally have found it to be a much more pleasurable experience. Mike, share your thoughts. Let's hear what you got.
That was creepy how you said that, Lucas.
I know, right? Listen, anytime you're in the room, David, it's how it comes out.
Oh my. Well,
they never know what they sign up for. They're like, "Oh, sure, I'll do the podcast."
Yeah, this guy's really professional.
I'm gonna leave that in. I'm just telling you. I'll leave it. Sorry, Mike. Sorry.
No worries. No worries.
So do you work on anything, or just you seem to do high end German Audis?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So in the performance world, it is probably more beneficial to have a specialty niche market because of the types of tools and training required for some of these things. If you work on every single vehicle, you're going to have a bad time with all the tools and programming and software required and subscriptions, what have you. So if you have a niche market that is profitable for you, then stick with it. For us, it was Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche product. So that's what we dealt with on a daily basis.
When you say, you're talking about the specific performance items that you have to purchase in order to be a vendor, or how does that even work?
So, it can go a lot of ways. So what I was talking about specifically was to even service the vehicle, to make the modifications. Sometimes you have to make the modification and perform coding after the fact, or sometimes you need to disassemble a component that requires a special tool. So this can get really deep into the specialty of the performance vehicle you work on. If Lucas specialized in diesel trucks, having that heavy duty software for some of the deletes, some of the specific programming requirements for, anything that he's doing tune related, or any of the special tools for the engine, for the modification he's making. That shop has to be good. You have to understand the vehicle and be able to service the vehicle basically before you can move up into modifying those components. So you have to understand the vehicle and how it operates before you become proficient in modifying it and making it better. Because if you don't know how it works from the factory, you're going to have a tough time making it any better or proficiently working on that vehicle to modify it.
Exactly.
So if you're tinkering, you shouldn't be considering doing any type of performance work on a
correct.
make.
You should be very good at working on those vehicles before you consider making a business out of modifying them on a full-time basis. So Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche was what we dealt with primarily. So we had the factory software, we had all the engine tools required for those vehicles, and we also knew how the systems operated on the vehicle, from circuit design to turbocharger systems to the logic of the engine computer. All those things have to be taken into consideration whenever you want to modify the car and work on it. Because, to be honest, whenever you are a performance shop, those customers tend to bring those cars back to you for everything and every problem that it has, because you modified it, you touched it last. So you're going to be doing a lot more than just putting on intakes and exhaust systems and uploading flash tunes. You do end up servicing those vehicles, especially in the high end. When people find a shop or a technician that they like and trust to modify their high end car, they tend to come to them for everything.
Let's be real here. I think we need to take the elephant, put it in the middle of the room, and shoot it. They didn't come back to you because they trust you. They came back to you because you're married to that car. Everything you touched on it is your fault from now on, right? And I think that's kind of my perspective.
Hold on. Let him answer. Is that the case?
So there is a joke in the industry that it's always the tuner's fault.
Yeah.
Every time you lose a race, it's the tuner's fault. Every time you have slow track times, it's the tuner's fault. Every time your check engine light comes on, it's the tuner's fault.
Yeah.
He's not lying. You will have those customers where the ever since you is big with them. The force is strong with them in the ever since you.
Right. Well, and here was my experience, right? Realistic expectations. And I didn't know this at the time, so maybe perhaps this was my fault. But looking back, I realized that those clients did not have realistic expectations. And it wasn't just with the truck, right? Or the car, whatever it was we were working with. Many of them had an expectation of how much power it was going to make, what it was going to run like, what it was going to do. And they envisioned it in their mind of what this was going to be. Or they had this expectation of, hey, I watched trucks on, Power TV, and they installed this turbocharger and it took them 30 minutes. The show's only 30 minutes long. Why are you charging me $400 to do this? And they see these things. They think it's this really cool idea. They think, oh gosh, I want my truck to be this, that, or the other. And now they go and they begin to modify the truck. Well, guess what? And one of the things we always explained was, yeah, I can tune a truck, but that doesn't bring the other components required up to snuff to handle the tuning. So now we have to be thinking about turbocharger. We have to be thinking about transmission clutch issues. We have to be thinking about fuel system, right? There's other components that have to be addressed. Mm-hmm. Now they make that repair, and guess what happens? Well, now the truck's broke. Well, ever since you worked on it, now my truck's broke. Well, yeah, we talked about these other things that you needed to do, these auxiliary items that are required to accomplish what you want to accomplish, but you didn't have the money for that. So it was something that was commonly happening, but they were more worried about purchasing that performance part than maintaining and keeping the vehicle in a quality and operational status. They would rather have a big set of injectors and a tune than they would put that wheel hub in the front of the truck. So what does that mean? That means every single thing they do, it's about money. For me, it seemed like that crew was more money driven and focused than they were value focused. And for me, that just wasn't a good fit.
Agreed. So I actually just had this conversation with somebody the other day. When I compare my target demographic from the performance shop versus my general auto repair shop, is one of the big things I've noticed is now both of my shops used digital inspections and digital communication. We did everything in our power to make sure that the customer understood what we were doing, why we were doing it, and what was going to be the result. We tried. Okay. But my high-end clients, I found them to be, I don't want to get crucified by the public for this one, but the more expensive the car, the cheaper the customer was.
Right.
Really?
At my general repair shop, a 2010 Honda Civic comes in and I make my recommendations. It comes out to $2,000. Customer considers it, talks it over with their spouse, and they call me back 10 minutes later and say, go ahead, I need it to be safe and drive my car. So I tell the person with the Audi S7 that they need $2,500 in work to repair a couple leaks because every Audi leaks from every orifice. And I get price shopped. I get they attempt to barter. They want to haggle pricing. And what I find is a lot of times people with the high-end cars, they end up being what I call car poor, where they bought a car that was $70, $80, $90, $100,000 new. They buy it second, third, fourth owner, and the car is absolutely affordable in the $30,000, $40,000 range. But I've always said cars depreciate in value, but parts and service do not. So the cost of maintaining that vehicle ends up being too high for them, or the cost of fixing that vehicle ends up being too high. Now, they tend to spend the money on the modifications, but when it comes to those modifications, they want to price shop the internet. So, hey, that downpipe you want to sell me, this site sells it for cheaper, and that website is breaking the MAP policy and selling it at a cheaper price than they're supposed to. So small businesses fighting with the internet and mega wholesalers is a whole nother conversation and a whole nother battle with the aftermarket, and one of the many issues that you'll find in a performance-oriented shop.
Absolutely. And we went through the exact same thing. There were a number of wholesalers, and what we found was that certain manufacturers, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but certain manufacturers were okay taking a big buy-in from a big company and allowing them to sell their products for a little bit less. Or better yet, what they would do is they put this MAP price out there. and they'd say, hey, listen, you guys, you can mark this thing up 15% GP. You'll be great. You'll make tons of money. Now, here's the thing. They were still selling or telling us the minimum we could sell it for was MAP. The big vendor was selling that same fuel pump for MAP, but guess what? That big vendor was buying it way cheaper than I was able to buy it. They had this huge buy-in, and they're making 50 and 60% GP on this part, and they're selling it online. They have no brick and mortar to support. They have nothing where they have to support this with service after the sale. So for me, that was one of my big complaints. And I think that was something we saw time and time again, especially in the diesel world. And then you really saw some folks get in there and kill the diesel market. They started really selling parts cheap, and they'd say, well, MAP's this, but I'll sell it, I'll sell it behind the scenes, or,
Yep.
Call me and I'll hook you up. And so people would come in, and it would seem like, here's my perspective, is that we would be working with a client on a auto repair issue, and we would provide to them an estimate, and they would come back and they would say, yeah, but I can buy this online and this online, and I could present the value proposition. Mr. Customer, I know you can get that online cheaper. I completely understand. But what you need to realize is I'm not just selling you a part, I'm selling you a repaired automobile. And with that comes a 36-month, 36,000-mile nationwide warranty. With that comes my personal support 24/7. If you need something, you can get in contact with me. If something goes wrong, I stand behind it. If my warranty company won't, I'll cover the tow, I'll cover the rental car, whatever we have to do to take care of you. And really quickly, the value side of the scale begins to outweigh the price side of the scale. But what was odd for me is that when we talked about performance guys, they never switched that. They never saw it differently. It was like they were constantly just focused on price. They didn't care about value nearly as much. They were just getting online. And tell me if I'm wrong, I think forums and Facebook groups that really made these guys feel like they're true experts on their vehicle because they're so excited they want to learn about it. Maybe that contributed to it because they say, well, I could do that. I already know about all this.
You just said the F word. That's the forum is the F word in my shop. Anybody that starts off with hello, well, I read on the forum that, that already indicates an issue. Because you're right, there are internet experts out there. There's armchair and YouTube certified master technicians providing their input everywhere. That may not understand the business side of things, may not understand, they cannot even understand the technical side of things, and they're giving people advice on it.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a shame.
Absolutely. And, I actually got kicked out of a couple forums years ago because I absolutely stood up and said, listen, you guys are giving false information. And one of the situations was on a CP3, be it a Duramax or be it a Cummins, if you unplug the fuel control actuator, that thing will make 26,000 pounds of rail pressure or whatever until the overflow opens or the overpressure valve. And these guys were saying, yeah, if it won't start, what you want to do is unplug the fuel control actuator and crack an injector line. I'm saying that's a good way to get yourself killed or end up with an hydraulic injury. I mean, we're talking about something that could seriously injure somebody. And these guys are throwing it around like it's willy-nilly. And I'm like, dude, that's dangerous as all get out. What if there's another reason the truck's not starting? So I definitely agree that the forums can be really bad news. And I think it gives them this idea that they know way more than they do. And I think that makes it dangerous. I mean, I hate to tell you guys, but we see 2 to 3 trucks a month that have either been at another shop or that they are at a friend's house or the owner or client has been working on the truck. And when they come in and say something like that, we automatically start with a $500 testing fee. And they're like, what in the world? $500 to test this? Yes, sir, because you've been working on it. I have to clean that up. And it may offend some people. And of course, I say it in a much more polite way. But I have to clean this mess up to be able to start at square one. If you just bring it to me to begin with, I'm at square one and I know where I'm going. I can usually fix your truck for a reasonable amount. But after you mess with it, boys, that's a different story.
Yeah, when you have to fix
Go ahead. I don't start at 500. It's 250 min, and I say I'll call you as soon as we need more, because we've gotten this here, especially lately. We've gotten a rash of they couldn't fix it at this shop, so we brought it down to you. Like, okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Yeah, I had it yesterday. Car was at the dealer for 4 weeks for a cranking no start, and it came to me, and it was towed in, and it was gone in 45 minutes. It was an immobilizer problem. 4 weeks at the dealer, unreal.
How does that even happen?
And you know what? I don't know, and I didn't care to ask the guy because it's tough to worry about what other people have done. I typically say when they come in, they want to give me a story. I tell them, you know what? It's okay. I have to start at square one. So we're going to start at the beginning and we're going to go from there. If I find anything that has been messed up, I'll document it, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Mike, do you know who Gonzo is?
Gonzo.
Yeah.
From the Muppets?
No. I mean, he might look at that and say that's a real compliment. Scott Gonzo Weaver from, I guess he's writing for Motor Age. I don't know who he's writing for now, but yeah. Scott wrote a book, and it had tales of the auto repair shop. And one of the things that I'll never forget is one of his stories was the dog tales. And he said, it just seemed like everybody that walked through the door was over here preparing to tell him this whole long story about what was going on with the car. And it was, hey, listen, my dog ran away. And he's like, what in the hell does your dog running away have to do with your car? I need to know what your car's doing. I don't need a 45-minute story about what you've experienced today. I need to know what your car's doing. So, I can definitely sympathize.
Yeah. Well, have you ever heard of Occam's razor?
No, I've not.
Sure.
Occam's razor is the law of parsimony, which basically says the simplest thing is probably what's wrong. So KISS comes from that. Keep it simple, stupid comes from Occam's razor. So when I hear, it's always good to get a story, right? They've told us and trained us, hey, get information from the customer, but sometimes the customer's information could get cloudy, and throw in some variables and things that aren't necessarily needed, like the dog running away and my mom's sick and this or that.
Yep.
So I usually say, just leave it with me. Tell me what your customer concern is. I'll duplicate the problem and I'll go from there. It's a little blunt, and it's said, like you said, in a nicer way, but sometimes we have to do that.
Yeah.
Now, on the performance side, however, sometimes we need a story, so we can figure out where the customer is probably lying or where somebody is mistaken, where the customer is mistaken. For example, Mark 7 GTI, the MQB platform of the newer turbocharged 2.0 Volkswagen Audis have an issue with valve float. And it's very common for people to money shift those vehicles. So valve float does occur whenever they shift to the incorrect gear, and it ends up blowing everything up. So you get the car and you go to do a build, and then you find out that the camshaft with the pressed lobes has twisted whenever the valves and the pistons had met. They tend to leave out the part where they money shifted and caused that to happen, or they were in the middle of a race. And you end up I found that out on a particular vehicle that brings up the story because they posted the race on Facebook. So I found out they were racing. I heard it blow up. And you heard the RPM scream when he shifted, and he swore, and he knew what happened, and all that was on Facebook, posted by the person in the passenger seat. So that's how I had found out what had happened to the camshafts based on a Facebook video.
Right. Well, and here's the thing is that entire subculture of the automotive world looks at this completely differently than your standard client does, right? Most of the clients that come into my shop would never, ever think about saying, I'm going to have to lie because it might mess up my warranty, right? They don't care, right? It doesn't matter to them. And that subculture focuses so heavily on deceiving the dealer in some cases, or deceiving someone who's worked on the vehicle. So, they've made this mistake and now I can't really afford to fix the car. And I think it's important to recognize that. I don't think much of this is done out of malice, right? It's not that they're trying to be mean. It's not they're trying to rip somebody off or take advantage. It's
You're
they
100%.
really can't afford the position they're in. And, so I've got some clients who like to do performance work. We will do it for them. But I'm going to tell you something. Performance work in this shop is at full margin. And I explain. I'm more than happy to do it for you. This is what it's going to cost. It's not going to be as cheap as somebody else, but I'm able to stand behind this. Mm-hmm. Right? Do you want this experience with another shop who can't stand behind it, who won't stand behind it? They're just going to look at you and say, I don't know, man, it's not my problem. Or do you want to work with somebody who knows what they're doing, who's done this before? We can ensure that we get your truck fixed the right way the first time. We know what to do if things go wrong. And the thing was, I had this buddy and he owned a shop that did just performance work. And he got so frustrated and so aggravated about the fact that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could sign up with one of these vendors and be selling parts. And maybe they weren't making these huge margins. Maybe they didn't have this great buy-in. But the reality is that anybody could sign up, be selling parts, be working on these vehicles and act like or convey themselves as an expert. And now we've got to clean up the mess. So I think it's we talk all the time about who's your clientele. Who is your client? Who is it that you want to work for? Who is it that you're designed to work for? We got to be really careful when we're dealing with performance because, man, some of those expectations are super unrealistic.
Yeah, and that's usually due to misinformation spread on the internet that the customer reads. That can be found just from a lack of knowledge on the topic and what's going on with their car, or people blowing smoke to them, and then you tell them the real deal and they're hesitant to believe you. So that's tough.
And then they have no relationship with that random person on the internet. That frustrates me too, because we had a long-time customer, a very long-time customer, come in. Their Jeep Liberty, it blew a hole in the block. It's a Jeep Liberty. It's what they do. And he was driving, blew the hole in the block, dumped all the oil. They had it towed up to me, and I said, hey, you got to put an engine in this thing. And I priced out a remanufactured engine, with everything attached to it and the whole thing. And it was close to $6,000. And they didn't respond immediately. We sent the estimate via email and text, and they didn't respond. The lady comes into the shop and she's like, why is it so much? And I'm like, well, it's a remanufactured engine. These engines are problematic. I can't use a used engine. I have no problem using a used engine if it's the right year, make, and model. I'll put a used engine in there. But this wasn't it. So I explained to her why we were looking to do a remanufactured engine and everything that came with it. And she's like, well, we asked on a forum, and this guy said that you shouldn't be charging me any more than $3,500, and that $6,000 is just ridiculous. And I stopped and I looked at her and I go, now, how long have we been doing business? And she's like, a long time. And I said, why would I lie to you? What do you really think I'm trying to get rich off this one engine that you're going to do at the shop? She's like,
right.
No. I said, okay, then do you even know this person on the internet? She's like, no. I said, why do you even trust this guy has no idea what he's talking about. I've explained to you why it's $6,000. Do you understand? She's like, yeah. And, we left friend. It was fine. But man, why would you trust? And I know that person's saying what you want to hear. And that's what it ends up being. That person's saying what you wanted to hear. And therefore, you're more likely to believe them than me, who's telling you something you don't want to hear. But it's absolutely frustrating.
Well, and think of it like this. I mean, we have long discussed the fact that we have an image issue in this industry, right? We know it. I mean, it comes up every single day. It comes up when I'm talking to people within our industry. It comes up when I'm talking to clients. And look, I completely understand why some people are untrustworthy. There's a lot of shops who have done some things that are just downright unbelievable. I've seen it. We've talked about it on here. I think a lot of that is due to ignorance. I don't think it's they intend to rip somebody off. I don't think necessarily people are trying to do the wrong thing in many of those cases, but the reality is it happens. And that creates baggage You know, I'm big with Rick White. He's done a lot of training for us, and Rick always talks about emotional baggage. And every experience you encounter in an auto repair shop, you build some baggage, and you build that up, and eventually, you know, somebody gives you this big estimate. What do you do? Well, I want to make sure this is accurate. I want to make sure that this is right. But the reality is, and we talk about price matching, we talk about how somebody across the country can't tell you if your price is accurate. You don't know what they're looking at. I mean, for God's sakes, we tell our service advisors, hey, make sure you go and understand why the technician's telling you it's going to be X hours. Because you don't know if it's rusty. You don't know if it's got custom modifications. You don't know what's happening with the car. And you mean to tell me some guy across the country can tell you how much it should be to fix this car? BS.
Yeah, exactly.
No shop across the street could tell you. I have to see the car. It's just ridiculous.
And the shop down the street can't tell you what a good price is either, because they have different expenses, different amounts of personnel, different overhead costs. I mean, everything is so specific. It's what you need to charge in order for you to stay in business. And they're really, at the end of the day, doing business with you because they like you and they trust you. And then that's
exactly.
And no other reason, because your price is whatever it has to be. And I'm sorry, but the guy down the street can charge whatever the hell he wants. There's a shop less than a block north of me. You know, the prices, they're all in zeros. He charges $100 labor rate. It's $100 exactly. So it's 1 hour, $100. He doesn't mark up his parts properly. And, you know, he always has a sign out front with discount alignments. And he does all of the used car work for the entire area. That's what he spends most of his time doing. So customers will come in and we're like, hey, I was down a good deal. And they said this, that, and the other. And you're like, okay, I can't do what Good Deal does. They do them and then we do us. I'm nowhere near what Good Deal is going to charge you. I don't use a lot of the parts that Good Deal is willing to use. I just don't like them. I don't trust them. So you need to decide what's best for you. And I mean, they usually end up coming to us, but it's unfortunate that they end up they think it's an apples to apples comparison.
Right. And look, here's the thing when it comes to performance. Is they think the same thing when it comes to performance. And I have been known to lay it out in front of them. And I'll put the numbers on the table and I'll say, look, you know, you've got 3 primary vendors in the diesel performance world, and all of them, here's their prices from these 3 places. I've spent $50, $75, $100, $150,000 with each one of these vendors. I've got about as good of buy-in as you can get with any one of them. Now, here's what my price is for this part. Now, I'm charging you this, and I'm charging you this much install. Now, let's talk about this for a minute, because you can see how much markup is in that part. It's not that much. Now, Mr. Customer, how would you feel if you pulled out of here and because of, let's say that I install a component incorrectly, there's damage to the vehicle. Let's say it blows a head gasket and it's my fault. Now, we all know that's an unrealistic scenario. But I said, now, look here. If I only make this much on the job, how could I stand behind that? How could I protect you if I match this price for Joe Blow down the street who's selling you the part for $10 over what it costs? And he said, well, you couldn't. Right. That's my whole point. If I'm going to stand behind this, if I'm going to take care of you, we have to do this. And if you're not willing to work with me on that, then I'm sorry, you can't get the level of service that I offer. If you want my level of service, it costs this. You can't compare the two.
Let me ask you this, Mike, because there's some in ASOG and in other forums that have talked about eventually going to charging retail for parts. Whatever it costs you at the parts store, at your local parts store, or even whatever it costs you online, that's what we're going to sell you the parts for. But we're going to double or triple the labor rate. Now, of course, I don't tell that to the customer, but that's the model that they're looking at. And they see that as the future because of the amount of pressure or a pushback they get whenever they go to sell parts themselves. everybody's questioning, why are you buying this, selling me this alternator for $400? I can go down to AutoZone and get it for $90. And so the solution to that, they see it as, well, fine, I'll sell it to you for $90, but my labor rate is now, that installation was an hour, so we're $125. Now it's $250 or $300 for the installation, and I'll sell you that part for $90. And it is what it is. Is that now I don't prescribe to that in the general repair shop world, but is that a viable option to mitigate some of that pushback you get, because you are selling brand A downpipe and they can find it online for X amount of dollars? Can you double, triple, quadruple your labor dollars on that installation and then just sell them the part at whatever they're finding it online?
I don't think we can do that in the performance world, because there's not enough margin in that part for you to double, triple the labor rate. Now, I could see selling the part at cost and bumping up the rate a tiny bit. It may be semantics, but if we would like to do it that way, we can. It's newer. Typically you want to make your money on both sides, but that's one of the reasons why there is a difference between the performance world and the general repair world, because there are better margins on the auto repair side than there is with the modification side. In the end, it comes down to your customer. You can't risk and lose everything just to gain that one customer that's arguing with you about the price of something. Sometimes some people are not your customer and you won't work well together. But, now that you mention it, we're living in an age where everything is instantaneous. Everything is online. Everything is, online is setting precedents for things. So people are going to go by the online pricing, even though we try to tell them, listen, it's our service that you're getting. You're getting my support, you're getting, you're supporting a small business and we're going to be here for you all the time. And it reminds me of the sign I saw.
You posted something like that on your Facebook page, and you were probably just venting, but you posted it to your just normal Facebook friends. It wasn't to the shop owners. Yeah. And some of them supported you and said, yeah, I agree with you, Mike. But there was one in particular, and I don't know if you remember this, but the guy called you out, essentially. He said your
value-based service.
Yeah, it's your job to translate the added value, the added cost in value to me. If I don't see the added value, you shouldn't be charging me. Or if you're not even providing the added value, you shouldn't be charging me that extra dollar amount just because you need to make money. That's not my problem. Well, what do you say to that guy? And I don't think I remember the exchange, or even if you got into exchange, but what do you think of that?
Well, that guy is a customer, and he has spent a lot of money with my shop.
Yeah.
So I think he wasn't necessarily attacking me, as he was describing the point of view that somebody would have in that aspect. But what I would say to that, because I said this to my fiance, who works with me in the shop, and I said, Beth, why does everyone think that we're not allowed to charge what we want to charge? Why do we have to justify our price to everybody? I said, every other industry charges what they want to charge, and barely anybody bats an eye, but auto repair has to fight for it so much. Why do I have to explain all these things? Now, I understand providing value, the value proposition, showing people what you're getting for your money. But for a second there, I was just assuming that he was saying, you don't deserve to charge what you charge unless you can really, really prove it to me and show me that it's my benefit. It was tough.
Well, look, from my perspective, from the outside looking in, I think it's quite simply, as an industry, we've done this to ourselves. We've created this monster. And look, there was a post the other day, Brandon Dills, good friend of mine, popped up and he was talking about unifying our industry. And there was a list of people saying it'll never work. It'll never happen. You can't do that. And I'm like, and that is exactly why it never happens, because everybody says you can't. So nobody ever tries. And I've long said that many of these organizations, like your garage owners associations, your auto care associations, and I understand why they don't. I'm not saying that I don't sympathize with their position, but man, wouldn't it be cool if one of them kind of came together and said, hey, we all need to kind of get on the same page, even if 10% or 1% of shop owners in the country went in a singular direction. Think about it, what it would do for our industry. And you know, I think that the reality of it is that the consumer is looking at us and saying, I just need the cheapest possible price. And I know every other shop in town, if I push on them, right? They're not trained. They're not educated in many ways. I'll push on them and they'll bring their price down, right? I just want the best price. They don't see value and they don't care about value from auto repair. And that's because we've not educated them about what value from auto repair looks like and why value from auto repair is important and why it costs less in the end than it does if you know, you take it to Joe Blow down the street and you have to have it worked on 4 times. And then you've got corporate partners who, you know, they go out and they scan the car and they say, oh yeah, it's probably your oxygen sensor, you know, and really famous coach always says, you realize the parts store's in the business of selling parts, right?
Yeah.
Come on now. I mean,
and they
we've
get
done
so,
this and we've allowed
they're
it.
so like, they talk out of both sides of their mouths because they want to support the installer, but at the same time, they're really ambiguous about what the parts store guy can say and cannot say. They should be providing clear language. Yes, we're scanning your car. No, it is not a solution to the problem, because it's not. And I get that they're trying to sell parts, but at the same time, they should be viewing the installer as a much bigger opportunity than the one retail customer that they're going to get that one purchase from, and then that's it. And likely install it incorrectly or not install the correct part or not diagnose it properly. And then they're going to be back swapping parts over and over and over again. You know,
and welcome to the performance world, right? Welcome to the performance world. You just nailed it. We don't need to say anything else. Episode over. We're done. We got this. And I dude, I'm telling you,
quick one.
I mean, Mike laid it out perfectly. And I think we have made every reasoning for why not to get into performance. Now, listen, I'm going to tell you something. There's a local guy to me who builds hot rods, and you would consider him a performance shop. And when folks take him a hot rod, he says it's going to be 2, 3, maybe 4 years before I get done. And they say, okay. And he says, and we're going to start with $100,000. You know, where's your money at? Bring me the money. And they don't say anything about it because he's built that reputation. He's educated those who are coming to him in regards to that. This is what to expect from me. I'm not going to work on your schedule. I'm not going to work on your budget. I'm going to tell you what it's going to take to do what you want to do. It'll be done right. It'll be a high quality product when I get done. But I set the rules, not you.
Is that the answer then? To build the reputation?
That's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we did. That's what we did to communicate to the customers at the performance shop about what it's going to take. Now, I got to that point by trial and error, of course. So,
yeah, sorry
puppy.
about that.
It's okay. I like dogs better than people anyway. Okay.
Me too. So, you know, and look, I think you're exactly right. Setting expectations, and you have to build a brand, and you have to build.
That's what I'm saying is building the brand. Is that what it takes? I'm taking it to what's it called? PSK Performance. So I've got to take it to PSK Performance because I saw the guy on YouTube, and he was absolutely ripping down the track. Because you showed your age a little bit, Lucas. It's not the horsepower TV or power TV or whatever it was called back in the day. It's all YouTube videos and hours upon hours of these guys clipping up the video of their installation and making it look like it was a pretty simple installation. They know what they're doing. Look, they're talking about it on YouTube, and they have 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and they go down the track and they post these ridiculous times. That guy's not going to get questioned on his price necessarily. He's going to be like, hey, did you check out my YouTube channel? Well, great. I'm this price. Take it or leave it.
Well, and so the same thing happened in the diesel market. It was all hype, right? And at the end of the day, here's what comes of that. Because I've been there, I've done that. We had dyno days. We did the whole 9 yards, right? It becomes exhausting. That hype and that following becomes exhausting. You can't go to Walmart. You can't go to eat. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything without somebody pointing you out of a crowd. And maybe that's not so bad, but then every single thing you do falls back to that reputation. You have to constantly guard that reputation. You constantly have to feed that reputation. And all it takes is a couple people coming back to say something bad about you or damaging that reputation. In that, you're having to pedal back through that. It's a lot of work to have that hype. And I'm going to tell you something. I think people are becoming more wise to that. They realize a lot of these people who had all this hype around them, man, they don't really know what they said they were able to provide. They didn't actually provide it. They didn't actually have that knowledge. You got a couple people like Nelson Racing Engines. Boys, I mean, you can't argue with that kind of performance. Gary Javo, you can't argue with something like that. Nope. I mean, you look at it and you say, these guys really know what they're doing. You pick up the phone and you call them and you say, hey, listen, I want you to put twins on my Viper. All right, $120,000, bring me the car. I'll have it done next year. What? Is that where we need to set ourselves up? And I think there's got to be a proverbial shift within these smaller, low dollar, and I don't mean to say low dollar. That's not the right word. These smaller performance shops who are not yet prepared for what they're getting in. Yes. Yeah.
Accessible.
They need to understand what they're getting into. It's not the same thing.
Yep. Which that can bring us to talk about something. We talk about, hey, bring me $100,000. It'll take 2 years. And one of the issues that some performance shops have, they're started by younger people. They're started by people that may have been professional technicians, but were strong enthusiasts. And they want to do it because they love it and they're not business people. And they go through these growing pains. But in the business world, here's something that I came across that was a struggle for me. Okay. So we would have a car that would come in. It's an Audi S4, and the customer wants to do suspension. They want to modify the engine. They want to modify the exhaust. They want new wheels and tires. They want to spend, let's say, $15,000 to $20,000 on this vehicle. So we're going to take the time to order all the parts. We're going to take the time to do the research, take the time to do what we have to do, make sure this part works with this part. That part can be compensated with by the performance tune that the computer is going to get. Is the TCU going to need a tune to compensate for the engine tune? Because a lot of the European vehicles that we worked on were DSG transmissions, so we needed a tune to increase the clamping force pressure of the clutches so that it didn't slip. So what happens is they take a down payment for the parts because for some reason they just haven't learned yet to get money for their labor. And then that takes time. And so weeks go by, and then the shop is busy because all the projects take a long time and everything backs up and builds up. And they finally get the car done weeks later, and then they think they're getting this big payday. Meanwhile, they had so many efficiency and proficiency problems that they had a hole that they had to fill. When that person finally paid the rest of their bill, they're back at square one. Because in the performance world, it's hard to quote beat time. It's hard to stay ahead, especially, and I focus this situation on the small shops, okay, on the guys that started like me working daylight at a dealership and working nights in a little shop I rented until I started to grow my business. And those are the part of the growing pains. But the length of time it takes to perform a project versus what you can charge because of how competitive the performance industry is where a big problem lies. So people that want to open shops, they want to open performance-oriented shops, they really need to, you have to break the mold on the pricing and realize, like Lucas had said about, you know, if you want my level of service, you have to pay my level of cost, because trying to compete with Joe Blow's tuning down the street, it's just a race. It's another race to the bottom on a high end side of the market. So that shop in the end may take in more money, but they didn't make as much. You know, they may see more money go in and out of the bank account, but they're no better off than the small break joint
the
down
net
the street.
Profit, right? Gross profit, net profit, compared to where I was doing performance to where I am now, is unbelievable. Unbelievable, the difference. I mean, I could not look at performance and say under any way, shape, or imagination that I would ever be interested in going back. Never.
So you said something about beating time, and you know, at least in the general repair side, that's essentially what we're selling. Is we're selling blocks of time, right? And you waste an hour, like I can't resell that hour. It's that inventory is gone. We're screwed on that hour. Now we need to try to make it up somewhere else. So how do you bill out something like that? Because you're talking about the research time. Yeah. You're talking about having the complications that come with having to. We've done a few, modifications at our shop. Longtime customers that come in and they're like, "Hey, can you put a set of headers on my vehicle?" You get into it, and the headers are there's just a hair off, and you've got to modify this, and you've got to bend that, and you got to, and you may have bid whatever 3 hours for that job, and it takes you 5. It is billing like clock time feasible? Is that not an option?
That's my thing. That's what I do. That's what I do. If I'm going to do it, I'm billing clock time. That's all there is to it.
You have to, but the newer or younger or less experienced performance shop owners are not going to do that. They're going to use the labor guide, and they're going to get screwed on
the labor guide.
So you have to go. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So if you want to install a set of long tube headers on your Hemi, they're going to use the OE manifold replacement time.
1.5, 1.6. And the next thing you know, 3 days later, here you are wondering what went wrong, And look at it. It's happened to me. I think it happens to everybody that's in that. You've got to be billing actual time on job. And you have to, and there's no way to know what it's going to look like until you get into it in many cases. Now you've got these modifications. This has to be changed. This has to be adjusted. And you can disclaim all you want to your client, but unless you're very experienced with this job and can say, hey, typically this takes me 10 hours for $100 an hour, you need to be prepared for this. Man, you're going to be in really rough shape. And I've talked to a lot of guys who paint cars and things like that and do performance work. And, the ones who really care about the quality of the product, they're trying to put out this immaculate, amazing paint job. It's not cheap. It's not what you go over here and pay $35, $45 an hour at a typical body shop to accomplish. Right. These guys are really spending some hardcore time on that. And so I think you're looking at two different types of products, be it from a performance shop or the budget performance shop down the street. You're not getting the same thing.
What does the typical performance shop do? Like your Joe Blow down the street who does tuning, is he charging book time?
Yeah. So
that's wild to me.
Your normal and experienced owner, tuner, manager, they're going to be charging book time. They're going to be beating the price down on everything to get the job in.
Yep.
Because again, the market is very competitive. Now, so is auto repair. There's 10 shops on every street corner, but performance is worse because the margins are less.
Exactly. And I can distinguish my auto repair shop. I can set myself aside with that. But when I'm really making the margins that I know my business needs to make with performance, it becomes very difficult in performance to distinguish myself. You know, I took on a job like a big dummy. And he is a fantastic client, good friend of mine, and he listens to the podcast. So he knows I'm talking about him. And he has this old Hudson, and he brought it in. He said, I've got some electrical problems. And I looked at it and I said, I think I can just put a starter solenoid in it. I said, okay, cool. I can do this. You know, it's a replica, if you will. And I crawl up underneath the dash and I said, oh shit, right? I'm in trouble. This is bad. So I tell him, I'm like, I'm going to have to rewire this thing. It looks like the wiring system is pretty simple. I'll get this cleaned up and we'll go from there. And about the fifth wire that I traced that went from the right below the instrument cluster out through the firewall, around the front of the truck, around, came back under the firewall and came around the inside and hooked back to itself. When I was up to the fifth loop of wire like that, I said, I'm in trouble here, you know? And I probably had 125, 130 hours in this Hudson Terraplane rewiring it, to do it the way I wanted it, to get it perfect, to get the wires branched out the way I wanted them branched out, to get the loom into individual circuits like an OEM harness would look, and connected correctly, and rebuilding the gauges and putting all of this stuff together. How do you charge somebody for that at $125 an hour? Right? I mean,
you can't,
right.
And that's the issue.
I mean, and think of the liability with that, because now he's got this vehicle it's a $80,000-$90,000 replica vehicle. And what happens when I screw up and burn it to the ground when it leaves, right? I mean, I don't know that it's worth the hassle. I get people like performance. I get people like fast cars and fast trucks. But from a business owner perspective, I will never believe that it's worth the hassle. I just can't see it.
So is the problem the fact that somebody will always bid, $1,500 to rewire that vehicle, and therefore no?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
David, take this example, because this is the perfect example that infuriates me. Coilover suspension.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is book time on the typical spring or shock on a corner of any vehicle? An hour to an hour and a half, usually,
yeah,
right?
Max,
2 hours?
Yeah, hour and a half max.
Okay. So majority of the industry will still put coilovers on your car for $500 flat.
Yep.
With alignment. It's always a loss. So you do a job that takes longer. There's a lot of fine tuning involved with it, setting your ride height, setting up your dampening correctly, putting together the coilover kit. If there's something that has electronic ride height control, or it was a maglev car, you have to do coding to the module. If it was an electronic suspension, there's all these things you have to do, but everybody will do it for $500.
Yep.
Meanwhile, on the auto repair side, I charge somebody, 8 hours to put Monroe struts on their car. I would make more money doing a regular suspension on a regular car than I would putting a $3,000 set of Bilsteins on a $50,000 Audi.
Yep, absolutely. And I hate, we've got that exact kind of scenario in the shop right now. Guy puts a lift kit on his girlfriend's Jeep. The control arms vary in measurements from 3 inches off to 4 inches off, right? And I mean, like, the whole front axle's turned sideways, and this dude comes in here and bows his chest up. I installed it professionally. I know what I'm doing. Right. We're going to charge you basically the same amount of time we would have charged you to put a lift kit on it to take it back apart and get it to where we can align it. Right. We're doing the job over because you did this. And they're like, well, we didn't want to spend that money to have you install it. Well, at least if we'd have done it, it'd have been right to begin with. Yeah. Well, but that's expensive. Well, then I guess you get what you get, you get to spend the money anyway.
So
Yeah.
what's the answer? We're getting screwed all over here. We're not coming to a conclusion here.
Look, here's the deal.
I thought we had something with the hour thing, like, because you get into a shop management system like a Shop Monkey or a TechMetric or Shopware. You can actually show clock-in times on the vehicle. You can see, hey, this person clocked in at 9:03. They clocked back out at 1 p.m. So we're going to charge you for that time. And this is, they can take pictures along the way and show the progress that they made.
Right. So there have been some jobs, there are some projects and some modifications where you can take that, that time spent, you clock in and out. My one technician had a stopwatch and a time clock for those things. So he could, it was a long-term project. So if he spent 2 hours setting up a painless wiring harness, if he spent, an hour designing the relay circuitry, or running the remote battery wires and setting up the battery box, we would always take that time and add it. There's some things where we can do that, but then there's the typical performance jobs. If we're not talking custom builds every time, if we're talking headers on V8s, if we're talking downpipes on 4-cylinder turbocharged cars, the typical downpipe on a Volkswagen will pay 2.5 or 3 hours is what the book says, but you can only charge them an hour because that's what everybody in the performance world charges. So you'll lose that client. Yep. You'll lose that client to the competition without that. And yeah, you can make yourself stand apart, but that is the issue with the performance market is it's harder to do those things.
So is there an ASOG for just performance shops?
I don't think there is.
There's a couple diesel performance groups, but I mean, they're not active. And it comes back to many conversations. I'm telling you, it's a different type of market. The many of the shops are far more competitive, and you see far more, I would make the argument that the general repair side is just is no different than that. I mean, I'm friendly with a few shop owners in Kansas City. I'm friendly with them. We talk on Facebook every so often, but man, it's not that many. Most of them aren't online. They don't care. They have no interest in connecting. They don't join organizations like the Midwest Auto Care Alliance. They don't send. I don't know. I can't think of any technician I've ever interviewed here since I've owned my shop for 8 years that knew what Vision was. Here in Kansas City, the Vision show is in Kansas City. And I don't think I've ever interviewed a technician that's like, yeah, I was at Vision last year. My shop owner that I'm currently working at always sends me. I don't think I've ever interviewed it. I can't think of one off the top of my head. And that's the general attitude of the shop owners in Kansas. And I'm about to put everybody on blast here, but I don't know that they listen. So that's what seems to be in my mind, the general attitude of many of the shop owners in Kansas City. They just don't, they're trying to run their business. They're trying to make a living for their family, and then that's it. They don't care about the larger industry. And I mean, some of them are cutthroat. They don't care. They will blast you to a customer on a whim. They will try to steal every tech you've got. If it benefits them, they could give two craps about you, your neighbor down the street. I don't know. Like you could say that's the performance world, but man, general repairs, I think just as cutthroat.
Yeah, and it's not just Kansas City; it's everywhere. That's everywhere. I don't know anybody.
Lucas is the neck of the woods there. Everybody's buddy. They're hanging out every weekend, and they're all on each other's boats.
We have boats? Wait a minute. Who has boats?
You guys are in the mountains. I don't know what you guys do in the mountains, but
yeah, it ain't ride boats. Well, look, and we do have a lot of shops that get along very, very well. I don't mean to say we don't. There are still, we've got some who aren't interested in something like that. I think performance is a little bit different because you add some different complexities to that relationship. You know, this person makes more power. It's a lot more cutthroat than auto repair is a general standard, if you will, because the prices are so much lower. I mean, the margins are so low. So I just think that in many different ways, performance just leads to heartache and poor profits. And
Yep.
I mean, it can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm saying that it's going to be really tough to make it profitable and make it comfortable. What do I mean by that? You're not going to walk into this and be able to compete price-wise and still be profitable, still feed your family, still run a quality business and offer the type of service and service after the sale that I would want to as a shop owner.
What about sectioning off areas like the paint stores do, like the paint manufacturers? So if you want to sell DuPont paint, they will give you an area and you are the sole provider for DuPont paint in that area. If they want to buy DuPont paint, they have to buy it from you. Same, PPG is the same way. You can only buy it from the supplier, the selected supplier, and you can't come in all of a sudden and start offering chroma base at a cheaper price because you're not authorized to even sell the product. Is that a viable option?
Let me. I don't mean to interrupt, Mike. I'm sorry. I just want to say that I'll go back to that fuel pump manufacturer we spoke about at the beginning that kind of undercut everybody. This guy would sell his soul to the devil for the right amount of money and not think twice about it. And he owns a very large company and he does have a boat. And I'm going to tell you right here and right now, this dude could care less about who sells his product. He puts this charade around it, like, you know, minimum acceptable pricing, things like that. Listen, he doesn't care. It's not his problem in his eyes. That's your job as a shop owner. You'll never get the manufacturers behind it. It's like your training idea that we spoke about when it came to warranty and part sales. It ain't going to happen because you're not going to get them behind it.
That's depressing, Lucas. Sorry.
Well, so let me make it even more depressing. Something we've not talked about, something that we need to talk about, something that many people may not realize. I just have performance in the name of my business. And every single time they do an insurance audit, they come in, they say, are you doing any performance work? Are the components that you're installing on an automobile certified? Are they designed for this vehicle? Can you show me? Right? So
I was going to bring it up.
Oh, I beat you to
there
it.
You go.
Look at me go. What kind of liability are we facing? What kind of situation are we putting ourselves in when we make these repairs? You know, we saw diesel shops with massive fines for deleting trucks. I mean, fines that would make you sick at your stomach to realize you had just lost everything and they wanted their money now. What about the liability side of this?
It's a high liability. My insurance for my performance shop was multiple times more than my auto repair shop because of the liabilities. And it still didn't give me perfect coverage. So with the liabilities that we have, man, from, you know, when you're tuning, you've seen videos of many diesel trucks blowing up on the dyno and catching fire, and fuel leaks and turbochargers coming apart and scattering, and transmissions scattering and coming apart and blowing out the side of the door. There's a lot of dangers involved, and some insurance companies just will not insure you if you do performance work. And if you do, it's going to cost you. And you need to consider that when you're coming up with your pricing and you're thinking about your overhead. Proper insurance is expensive for a performance shop.
Yeah, definitely.
So you have to pay extra in performance and insurance. You can't make any money on parts. You can't charge appropriately on labor. The guy down the street is going to cut your throat. Is the allure just the fact that you get to drive a second owner clapped out S7 with coolant leaks really fast for about 10 seconds? I don't understand. What's the allure?
There is an egotistical side to the performance market, and that's where, when we were talking earlier about how the shops are cutthroat and they don't get along, a lot of performance shops do not get along with each other because of the competition, because of the egos, because of the puffy chests.
Yep.
It's kind of everyone for themselves. Not, and like you said, your shop owners around you couldn't care less about you. They don't want anything to do with you. They'll undercut you, but it's hard to explain. There is something different in the performance side. Oh, I went to this shop and they only got this much power out of my car. I went to this shop and my car rattled after I left, or they charged me this much and they only charged that much. In the performance side, it's more, and that spreads on the forums like wildfire. It spreads on social media much quicker than anything in my auto repair shop would. The performance side, you can just tell there are many more stresses on the performance side. And I can actually give you guys a bit of my personal story regarding my performance shop.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this 2020 was a hard year for everybody. Okay. Myself included, big time. So in 2020, I lost my mom in July. She died of cancer. And I had my performance shop and my auto repair shop going full bore. We were very busy. The performance shop was 2 months behind in work. And it was a very stressful time. So simultaneously, when all of this was going on, a lockdown, busy businesses, sick family, I got sick. And it turned out that I was having some heart problems. So I go to the doctor and they tell me I have abnormal EKGs and I have to go get stress tests and nuclear testing done on my heart. And my doctor says to me, you need to make a life change. You are too young. Now, I'm certainly not a very fit person. I'm 6 foot, 300 pounds. I'm certainly not super healthy. But she said, you're too young to be having the heart problems that you do. And we were talking and I talked about all the stresses that my businesses bring me, but a lot of it went back to the performance shop. Okay. The efficiency battles, the customer battles, the fighting with the cars,
Yep.
busy, but why is the business not doing as well as it should? It's because the money's tied up in all of these projects. So then we finally get paid, but we pay our bills and then the money is gone again. So I looked at Beth and we had a discussion. I called my father. I got his advice and I had decided to close my performance shop. And actually, Lucas, I had a short conversation with Rick as well. And that was one of the things he had brought up. And we decided to close the performance shop because I was my health was being affected by the stress I was under. Now, my situation is different because I had 2 auto repair shops. And I was very fortunate to have a very busy and well-known auto repair shop. My performance shop was very busy. The phone rang 50 times a day. Our schedule was months out. Cars were everywhere. But in the end, it was also a mixture of my long-term lease on that building was up. And I owned my property and building for my auto repair shop. I bought that a year and a half ago. And I haven't been healthier and happier since I've done that.
Amen. And
so is the performance side just general repair? Or did you just close that whole side of the business down?
So PSK Performance is closed. Okay. My other business is PSK Auto Repair. That business is open. Now, what I've done is I've cut out all the heavy line work. I've cut out the transmission building, the engine building, all of the major things. What I've kept is very easy, and very profitable. So I went and I picked and I chose the services I wanted to perform at the auto repair shop, which is less equipped. It is smaller than a performance shop was, but that's how it goes. And I've decided to keep some performance things that I know is easy and that are good money. There's very few select things. And I've decided to have my general auto repair shop, but still be able to do some performance. Okay, very slight. Some of my tuning capabilities, I do Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini, and Bentley. So some of those things I still do, but my large, busy performance shop that did everything from custom builds, custom wiring, custom suspension, custom transmissions, custom tunes, I closed it.
Wow.
And I know that and it wasn't about the money. Now, money is a struggle in the performance industry because of what I said, unless you really can charge properly for what your business needs, which is rare in performance shops.
Yeah.
You're going to struggle with money constantly. You're going to be in debt constantly. You're going to borrow constantly. That kind of stuff does happen in the performance world just because of the flow of projects. So I know that one of the goals of the podcast was probably to determine, is having a performance shop a good idea? And it's very rare that it works out without costing you more than just money. For me, it was my health.
Yep.
And
I don't know many owners of performance shops that aren't stressed to the max or aren't looking for an out one way or another. Now that they're very, very proud people, right? They won't tell you that. But many of them are pushed to the absolute max, and it is a big ego thing. And it's an ego thing to say that we can fix anything. We don't have any problems. We can tune anything. We can fix anything, because that is this misconception that we have to be this master. We have to have these abilities, especially we're in the shop and we want to portray how great we are. And look, I've been there, and I'm going to tell you something. We took a very similar path, except I just converted the shop I have from performance into auto repair. And I'm going to tell you, when I started making that transition, Rick talked to me. He said, Lucas, he said, your hours per RO is 36. He said, that's unheard of. And, the problem is that all of these jobs, you're getting these jobs apart. You can't get them back together because something has to be changed. You have to get this other part. Something went wrong. Then you get it back together. It's a high liability job. It's super stressful. All of these things are coming together on you and converging. You're super stressed out and you're not really generating any money. And I said, okay. And he talked to me for months about saying, look, just charge this matrix, set up a matrix, be 52 to 60% on parts, and charge book hour and charge an appropriate labor rate, right? Because at the time we were $65 an hour. And he said, watch and see what happens. And I resisted that for so long because I kept saying, we won't have any work. We won't have any work. Now our ARO is $1,100. We're at 4.5 hours a ticket. We're working on more cars with way less liability than we ever did with these big jobs. We're making more money. It's less stress. We don't have stuff sitting for days. If you ask me, would I go back? Hell no. Hell no. And I get that there are people. I think we've even got members in the shop who are 100% convinced that look, performance is the way to go. Performance is the way to go. I really like that. I understand if you guys don't like it. The problem is that there are too many odds stacked against you. You can build hype. You can build a brand that works. But man, I'm going to tell you, it is a hard row to hoe if you go that route. It's not as easy as general repair. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Amen.
And you know what's bad about that? It's general repair is pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of technicians, like I've got a technician who's he watches all the YouTube videos and he's hardcore into performance stuff for his own personal vehicle. And you know, he's always asking me, he's like, "Hey, we should do more performance work. We should do this, that, and the other." And I've resisted it. I'm like, "No, dude, I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. We can't get these cars out of here fast enough as it is. The last thing I want to do is add complexity to the equation."
Yep.
But I think a lot of technicians, like I definitely got into automotive repair because I wanted to tune cars. I wanted to do the performance work. I wanted to be able to know what I was doing while I was doing it. And I think that's still true. I think a lot of technicians get into the field, or they think that that's the end game. Like, if I just had this shop that was tuning all day and, you know, building these awesome cars, everything would be peachy keen. I wouldn't have to work on these clapped out Cobalts, leaky, you know, messy Chevrolets that are rusted out, and they're not as cool as working on that S7. But hopefully this podcast will bring them to reality.
Listen, you only need 1,000 horsepower diesel pickup to realize that you don't need 1,000 horsepower diesel pickup because you'll end up in jail. I don't know where that came from, but you know, it wasn't the jail part that was hard for me. I was able to talk my way out of most of those scenarios. But do you know how expensive anything that makes more than 999 horsepower is? I mean, you hit that 1,000 mark, things start getting very expensive.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this was awesome. And Mike, I didn't realize you closed the performance shop down, so this was kind of eye-opening. I thought you still had both shops open.
No, I wanted to. I actually wanted to bring that up for the reasons of, you know, having a performance shop is a challenge, and owning a business and operating a business is hard enough.
Yeah. But
performance adds a whole new level. So I'm hoping that if anybody, I know all the people on ASOG they're going to say, well, finally realize what we all think. Performance stinks. But for any of the younger people that are on ASOG that don't participate and they read the comments, they don't post, and you know they're wondering what they should do because they still love cars and they have a passion for it and a passion for performance. Because you love it doesn't mean you have to do it every day.
Amen.
Yeah.
You know, you can make money fixing cars because, again, like I said in the beginning, most people that specialize in performance are very good with these particular systems, so proficient to the point that they can make them better. So they can do a great job fixing the cars in auto repair, making more money, working less.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the ASOG podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast along with the work of ASOG, just go to our website, asog.site, that's ASOG.site, and click on the Become a Patron Now button. Becoming a patron gets you several perks, supports the podcast, and is entirely tax deductible. That's because ASOG is a 501c3 educational charity. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. It helps spread the word. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hitting that like button. 2020 was a tough year for everyone, especially Lucas, who at one point completely ran out of toilet paper. The like button offered help by sending over some, but when Lucas opened the package, it was that awful gas station one ply. Get some justice for poor Lucas by hitting that like button. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you have any topic suggestions, please reach out to me via email. My email address is david@asog.site. That's david@asog.site. Until next time.